Okay, so we'll get started. So Bruce County Council consists of the heads of council of the 8-member municipalities in the county. Prior to amalgamation, there were 31 members of Bruce County Council. The deputy heads of council, their deputy mayor, acts in place of the mayor should they be unable to attend a council or a committee meeting. As a county councillor, one must be careful not to place the interest of their own municipality above the interest of the whole county. As tough as it may be at times, the councillor must base any decision on what is best for the entire county. Councillors' effectiveness depends on councillors providing input on their areas while thinking and voting for the whole county. Councillors also have to make certain that they do not put themselves in a conflict of interest situation. They must ensure that decisions made do not benefit them, their immediate family, or their friends. The ministry will go into more detail about the roles and responsibilities of a councillor whose duties are carried out under the Municipal Act. Council, along with some committees, meet the first Thursday of the month in the council chambers at the County Administration Centre in Walkerton, which is where we are now. Other committees also meet on the third Thursday, and committee meetings begin at 9:30 in the morning. Council and committee agendas are posted to the website 1 week in advance of the meeting date. Council and committee minutes are also posted to the website after they are approved by council. Bruce County live streams all of their on-site meetings and also posts the video after the meeting. Quorum on council and committees is 50% plus 1, or in the case of Bruce County, that would be 5 members. Committee and council meetings are governed by the procedure bylaw, which outlines the rules for governing meeting proceedings. The role of committees are generally to make recommendations to council on matters which are in their jurisdiction, to guide and request staff to provide reports on the direction and nature of policy development, fact-finding, analysis, and generation of public policy matters, receive public deputations, and establish mechanisms to receive further public input on vital public policy matters. In Bruce County, we have 10 committees. We have an executive committee, a corporate services committee, which deals with finance, purchasing, and emergency management, information technology services committee, a planning and development committee, human services, which covers our housing, children's services, income and employment support programs, and strategic community initiative fund programs. We have a transportation environmental services committee, a paramedic services committee, long-term care homes committee of management. We have 2 long-term care homes, Bruce Lee Haven here in Walkerton and Gateway Haven located in Wyerton. We have a museum which is located in Southampton. We have a human resources department and a Bruce County Housing Corporation. Committee chairs are selected annually at the inaugural session in December of each year. The Bruce County Warden is elected indirectly by and from among the members of Bruce County Council annually at its inaugural meeting in December. Each member has only 1 vote for the election of warden, and it is done by secret ballot. The warden is a member ex officio of all committees and may vote on all matters before the committee. The warden, as head of council, presides over all meetings of council. Bruce County is responsible for long-term care. As indicated earlier, there are 2 long care homes in the county. Transportation includes year-round maintenance and capital improvements on the county road system and recreational trails, and oversees environmental matters such as county forests. Our human services includes housing, children's services. Our planning is responsible for land use planning as well as economic development. And human resources is responsible for the oversight of all aspects of employment in the county. Corporate services, as indicated earlier, is finance, purchasing, emergency management, and also looks after our facilities. Information technology is the IT services for all county departments. Our paramedic services is responsible for ambulance as well as our paramedicine program. Library services, there are 17 branches spread throughout the county. And our museum and archives, as indicated earlier, is located in Southampton. The term of office for this upcoming election is November 15, 2022 to November 14, 2026. Changes to the Municipal Elections Act for 2022 means a 2-week earlier start for members of council. Mileage is paid to county council members using their vehicles on county business, currently at a rate of 61 cents per kilometer effective January 1st, 2022. Meal allowances are also provided for councillors while conducting business, including if they were attending a conference. And that's all we have for our presentation. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin and Carol.
Thank you.
Sorry, forgot about David. David, we're going to turn it over to you next.
Thank you very much, Donna. I thought I was going to get off really easy. My presentation will be pretty much directed at aspiring candidates. I think that's important to let our candidates know, even the ones that have already signed their papers, the candidates who are out there that are just thinking about becoming councillors. So my remarks will be pretty much directed to that, although the workings of a council are somewhat similar, whether it's Bruce County Council or Brockton Council or whatsoever in Bruce County. I want to thank the aspiring candidates who are thinking about becoming councillors. That's really important, and it's certainly an honor. It was an honor for me to serve my community, and I'm sure you will find that as well as I did. You will certainly learn a great deal over many areas about many things as you go through your career as a counselor. And it's important to keep an open mind and learn as much as you can about your own community and the people that live there. I believe it's a great opportunity as well to work with others. And that's a very important part of any council, whether it's at this level or at the local municipal level. If you don't get along, you're not going to get anything done. So work as a team, and that's not always easy because people have differing opinions, and some people are a little more stubborn than others. So it is difficult, but if you have a good leader, if you can work together and come together to make a great team, you will get things done as a councillor in Bruce County and the local municipality. It's important to be very respectful, no matter whether it's to your fellow councillors or to the general public. The general public may come banging on your door all hours of the day, asking for this and that. And sometimes it's difficult, you know, to say, oh, well, you shouldn't be here. You can say, well, I'd like to help you, but I can call you tomorrow in the office, or call you at home tomorrow from the office. So you do have to be respectful of people's time and what they're thinking about it at the present time. So listen and learn. I think it's important for prospective councillors or councillors when they become full-fledged to talk to other councillors, not just in your own municipality, but reach out to neighboring municipalities, go to resource meetings that are provided by the province or by the Association of Municipalities. You learn by networking with other people, and that to me is really important. I've heard in the past that there are some councillors somewhere that micromanage. I don't think anybody in Bruce County would do that, but there might be the odd one out there. To me, that's not the way of getting along and doing things. And when I say respectful, I certainly mean to staff. Because if you're bothering staff, asking for reports every other day, things aren't going to go well. Make sure that if you do, and from time to time you might want a fairly good sized report, take it to council and ask council to approve that, and then staff will certainly be pleased to work with you on it. Now, the small things, I'm sure staff will look after. committee structure in lower tier municipalities, much the same, but sometimes we seem to have a lot more committees. So that will be part of your responsibility as being a member of a committee. You, in most cases, have a choice with, you have a choice here at Bruce County, but there are only so many committees and only so many council members to go to them. But actually, all the council members are on all the committees, I should say. So in closing, just if you are elected, I thank you. The community will thank you for your work. Use common sense, and remember, you can't please everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And we're ready to move on to municipal affairs.
Hello, my name is Caitlin Reddick. Attending along with me today from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing is Carol Sauvé. I would like to thank Bruce County for inviting us and for hosting this candidate and third-party advertiser information session. Next slide, please. These slides are meant to be a summary of some of the sections and should not be relied on for legal or official purposes. I do want to stress that we are not lawyers and that you should always consult the legislation and seek legal advice when necessary. We will not be able to cover every aspect of the municipal election, but hope that this provides you with a better understanding of the process and legislation and improves your comfort level. Congratulations for taking an interest in your community and in local government, whether you're interested in serving on a municipal council or on a school board or registering as a third-party advertiser. Next slide, please. Thank you. This slide outlines some of the topics that we want to cover during this session. The roles of elected members of council, head of council, and municipal staff, as well as the role of the school board trustee. The nomination process and how a candidate withdraws a nomination. Also, what happens if a candidate files a nomination and then changes his or her mind about which office they wish to run for. Some key dates, who is eligible to run for municipal office and school boards and who isn't. General campaign rules and election finances, such as campaign spending limits, contribution limits, campaign expenses, borrowing, what expenses are exempt from the spending limit, finance surplus and deficit, financial reporting at the end of the campaign period, compliance audits initiated by an application, penalties, general information about the voters list, and resources where you can find the information detailed on the second to last slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you are considering running for municipal office. Local government is the level of government that is closest to the people and is the most accessible and responsive to the needs of the community. You've made a decision to throw your hat in the ring, or you're thinking about it and are curious to know how to go about it. Sorry. Perhaps it's something you've always wanted to pursue. You want to make a difference, or you're not happy with some of the decisions that have been made, or you have a passion for politics. Regardless, it's a 4-year commitment that will be filled with challenges, excitement, disappointments, hard work, and a great deal of satisfaction. Ontario's municipal governments deliver local services, while the province establishes the legislative and policy framework. The Ontario government sets standards for many local services, such as land use planning, building regulation, and social housing. And the province provides funding to municipalities for delivery of some services. The ministry also works in partnership with the municipal sector to support efficient and responsive local governments that are sustainable and investment ready. Local government is a challenging environment with high expectations and limited resources, basically doing more with less. There is a limited understanding of roles of council and staff, and government is like no other business. You can't make everyone happy, so council must make difficult decisions in the best interest of the municipality. Before we get into an overview of the Municipal Elections Act, we wanted to provide a brief summary of the role of elected municipal officials and the role of staff. Please note that the information about the role of council and staff and accountability and transparency can also be found in the Counselor's Guide on the ministry's website. This guide is an excellent tool that can provide you with a lot more information about how municipalities operate and how council and staff can work together in the best interests of the municipality. Next slide, please. Thank you. Council and staff roles. First, let me start by saying that Section 2 of the Municipal Act stipulates that municipalities are created by the province to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction. And each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation for the purpose of providing good government. The Municipal Act is a legislative framework for municipalities, which seeks to balance local autonomy and flexibility with accountability and transparency of municipal operations. The key to an organization, government, business, industry, or local service club is for everyone to understand their respective roles and relationships. In the next few slides, we're going to review the role of the mayor's role as the chief executive officer, the role of council, and the role of municipal staff, which are all key to an effective and efficient local government. Next slide, please. Thank you. The role of council. It is the role of council to represent the public and to consider the well-being and interests of the municipality, develop and evaluate the policies and programs of the municipality, determine which services the municipality provides, ensure the administrative and controllership policies, practices, and procedures are in place to implement the decisions of council. Ensure the accountability and transparencies of the operations of the municipality, including the activities of the senior management of the municipality, as well as maintain the financial integrity of the municipality. And lastly, carry out the duties of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. For more information about the role of council, please refer to Section 224 of the Municipal Act. Next slide, please. Role of council continued. This is all done as a collective role, with all members each having one vote. Municipalities are created to be responsible and accountable governments with respect to matters within their jurisdiction, and each municipality is given powers and duties under the Municipal Act and many other acts for the purpose of providing good government with respect to these matters. Now I'm going to hand it over to Carol to continue.
Thank you. All right, next slide, please. So it is the role of head of council to act as the chief executive officer, preside over council meetings so that its business can be carried out efficiently and effectively, provide leadership to the council, provide information, recommendations to council on policies, practices, procedures to ensure transparency and accountability. The head of council also represents the municipality at official functions. And they carry out the duties of the head of council under the Municipal Act or any other act. So the role of the head of council is basically to act as a leader. And the head of the council is the chair of the meetings of council and the public face of the municipality. Next slide, please. So as the chief executive officer of the municipality, the head of council shall uphold and promote the purposes of the municipality, promote public involvement, act as the representative, and promote the municipality locally and elsewhere, participate in and foster activities that enhance the economic, social, and environmental well-being of the municipality and its residents. Although the legislation refers to the head of council as the chief executive officer of the municipality, this may be confusing to people with a business background. The head of council actually has very few powers that can be exercised independently of the rest of council, except where specifically delegated in cases of emergency or in the context of procedural matters. During a council meeting, the head of council has no greater power than any other individual member of council. It's important to note that council makes decisions, not any individual council member, including the head of council. So to clarify, the head of council always has a vote. There is sometimes confusion on this point in the media and with the public who think that the head of council can only vote in the case of a tie. Another clarification regarding voting, refraining from voting counts as a no vote. This is spelled out specifically in legislation in the cases of recorded votes. A tie loses, so the result is the same as having voted no. Next slide, please. All right, so the role of staff is set out in Section 225 of the Municipal Act. So this includes implementing council's decisions and establish administrative practices and procedures to carry out council's decision, undertake research and provide advice to council on policies and programs of the municipality, carry out duties required by legislation and other duties assigned by the municipality. So a key feature of effective and efficient councils is a well-developed understanding of the council-staff relations and the role of each party. The Councillor's Guide provides a list of ways that council members can assist staff to meet council's expectations. So just a few examples. Having a policy requiring comprehensive job descriptions for staff, providing clear policy decisions, directions, and expectations, adopt policies that complement and reinforce staff efforts, consult with staff before deciding on policies, being prepared for council meetings. Staff, in turn, should provide well-organized agendas with supporting materials, provide sufficient timely information and analysis to make council's decision-making easier, notify council of changes to legislation and programs, provide advice on policy, and notify council immediately of any unintended or unexpected impacts on policy decisions, and implement council decisions as effectively and professionally as possible. So as you know, there are some municipal staff positions that have statutory obligations: clerk, treasurer, chief building official, and fire chief. It is important that council not interfere with the statutory obligations of those roles. So for example, the clerk and treasurer positions have statutory duties or responsibilities assigned to them under the Municipal Act and other pieces of legislation. The Building Code Act would define statutory duties for the chief building official, and the Fire Prevention and Protection Act would define statutory duties for the fire chief. Next slide, please. The role of the Chief Administrative Officer. So a municipality may appoint a Chief Administrative Officer who shall be responsible for exercising general control and management of the affairs of the municipality for the purpose of ensuring the efficient and effective operation of the municipality and performing such as their duties as are assigned by the municipality. The function of the Chief Administrative Officer within the municipality is akin to the role of a Chief Executive Officer in a business environment. The CAO is responsible for the general control and management of the day-to-day operations of the municipality, which may include developing and implementing appropriate internal administration practices and procedures to ensure the efficient, effective, and accountable operation of the municipality. So to help understand the role of the CAO in the municipality, picture an hourglass. So council is at one end, and all the municipal staff and department heads are at the other end. The CAO is in the middle. So the smallest part where the sand in the hourglass flows through. So if council wants to give direction to a specific department, they have to go through the CAO. And likewise, if the department wants to give information reports to council, they have to go through the CAO. Just quick explanation. Next slide, please. Okay, so the Counselor's Guide provides some really useful information on how council and staff can work together. This slide provides you with a high-level overview of the relationship. Councils and their administration have different roles within the municipality, but their roles have common goals and purposes. In general, it is the role of the elected council to represent the community and set the direction and policy for the municipality. And it's the role of staff to manage people and resources to achieve council's vision. Just get there. So council generally sets the policy direction for the municipality, and staff provides the research and expert advice to help council in its decision-making process. Once council makes a decision, staff generally has the responsibility to implement the policy of the council. So for example, through administering and delivering services and programs to the community. Staff and council rely on one another to move the municipality forward. And both staff and council provide leadership, and council provides political leadership, while administration provides leadership to the organization. The relationship between staff and council is interconnected, and it is important for council members and staff to respect one another's roles so that they can serve the public in an efficient and effective manner. Municipalities are required to adopt a policy on the relationship between members of council and municipal staff. The municipalities have the flexibility to determine the content of these policies. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are going to provide a bit more information on each of the roles of council as described in the Counselor's Guide. In your role as representative, you were elected by your constituents to represent their views when dealing with issues that come before council. However, your constituents have many views and opinions, and you cannot represent all of them all of the time. So for many issues, you'll have to consider a variety of opposing interests and make decisions that will not be popular with everyone. You should use your judgment and decide based on the best interests of the municipality as a whole. In practice, there's no single correct approach to the representative role, and on many issues, you may find that you fall somewhere between the two opposing viewpoints. Be sure to familiarize yourself with any policies or protocols that your municipality may have in place regarding the handling of complaints and citizen inquiries. Although you may want to find some way of helping, remember to consult municipal staff. If your municipality doesn't already have a complaint policy, council may want to consider adopting one. So furthermore, there may be circumstances where decisions are made by designated staff that operate at arm's length from the municipality. And by where it could be inappropriate for elected officials to interfere or be seen to be interfering. So example of these would be the fire chief, the chief building official, or the medical officer of health. A councillor who has made promises that cannot be kept may lose credibility with the citizens and strain the working relationship with staff. So as I mentioned before, each individual council member has one vote when making decisions. Every member of council should vote on matters in the best interest of the municipality as a whole, and every member should respect each other's points of view during and after debating an issue at the council table. Once a decision is made by council, it is a decision of the municipality, and staff are required to carry out and implement that decision. To recap, council is the primary policy-making body of the municipality, while administrative staff is responsible for carrying out council's policy decisions. The two roles are distinct, but there are some overlap. So although staff is responsible for implementing a policy, council may wish to develop appropriate reporting mechanisms to help ensure that the policies are being carried out as intended and as effectively as possible, and so that council can follow implementation progress. Sorry about that. Next slide, please. So stewardship role. Council's objectives are to ensure that the municipality's financial and administrative resources are being used as efficiently as possible. So there's a fine line between council's overall stewardship of the municipality and the administration's management of day-to-day activities. Generally, council monitors the implementation of its approved policies and programs, but the practical aspect of its implementation and administration are a staff responsibility. Essentially, the day-to-day operations of the municipalities are left up to staff. To be effective in this stewardship role, council may wish to have processes in place to help ensure that policies adopted by council are being implemented. Staff are administrating services and programs as council intended. Rules and regulations are being applied correctly and consistently. Funds are being spent only as authorized, and the municipality's resources, financial or otherwise, are being used appropriately and as efficiently as possible. Establishing and following such policies and guidelines help council leave the day-to-day details for staff to manage. Council is freer to deal with exceptional situations, ensure that policies are current, and listen to issues raised by the public to represent the broader community interest. So before council can monitor and measure the municipality's administrative effectiveness and efficiency, it may wish to become familiar with policies that are currently in place. With input from municipal staff, council can determine whether the policies are functioning well or if changes are necessary. So I'm going to pass it on to Caitlin for the next slides.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Accountability and transparency. Ontario municipalities and members of council operate under a legislated accountability and transparency framework that include rules for the municipalities and rules for members of council and local boards. Ensuring accountability and transparency is one of council's roles under Section 224 of the Municipal Act and is a priority in maintaining public trust. Councillors are, of course, accountable to the public as elected officials. However, it is also important that procedures and policies are clearly set out and accessible, and that the day-to-day operations of the municipality are transparent. The slide outlines policies that council are required to adopt. Next slide, please. Thank you. Code of conduct. Code of conduct usually set out expectations and standards for councillors' conduct. Codes may help prevent ethical conflicts and help in their resolution, serve as a basis for council orientation and training, and serve as a reference throughout the operation of the council's term. With the growing importance of accountability and integrity, more municipalities have adopted codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards. Some have also adopted other procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of those members. Municipalities are required to establish codes of conduct for members of council and certain local boards, which must include certain subject matters. These would include gifts, benefits and hospitality, respectful conduct, including towards officers and employees of the municipality, of local boards, confidential information, and use of municipal or local board property and equipment. I'm also going to get into the role of the Integrity Commissioner. So you can stay on the slide. Thank you. Municipalities are required to provide access to an Integrity Commissioner. An Integrity Commissioner operates independent of Council and reports to Council with respect to the application of a code of conduct of members of Council and local boards. Procedures, rules, and policies governing the ethical behavior of members of Council and local boards. The IC functions may also include providing advice and education about the code and other ethical rules to members of Council and the public, as well as conducting inquiries into requests from Council or a local board, a member of Council or a board, or a member of the public about whether a member of Council or a local board has contravened the applicable code of conduct. The IC reports that, in their opinion, a member of Council has contravened the code of conduct. The municipality may impose a penalty in the form of a reprimand or suspension of pay for a period of up to 90 days. It's up to the municipality to decide how to proceed after the IC's report. To help ensure integrity and accountability in public office, the Municipal Act provides municipalities with authority to appoint certain integrity and accountability type officers. These include Municipal Ombudsman. This officer's function is to investigate in an independent manner decisions and recommendations made and actions done or admitted in the course of the administration of a municipality, local board, or certain municipal operations as the municipality specifies. This is a separate office from the Ontario Ombudsman, who also has a role with respect to municipalities. The Auditor General, who may assist Council in holding itself and municipal administrators accountable for the quality of stewardship over public funds and achieving value for money in municipal operations. The Auditor General must also perform his or her duties in an independent manner. The Auditor General's responsibilities do not include the responsibilities of the municipal auditor. Municipalities also may, if they wish, appoint a lobbyist registry and registrar and registration system, such as establishing a code of conduct for lobbyists and prohibiting former public office holders from lobbying from a specified time period. Next slide, please. Thank you. The Ontario Ombudsman has had a role with respect to municipalities. This role builds on the local accountability and transparency framework in the Municipal Act. This role is in addition to the Ontario Ombudsman role as the default meeting investigator for municipalities that have not appointed a local meeting investigator. The Ontario Ombudsman supports transparency in government and may recommend improvements. The Ontario Ombudsman may investigate municipalities when a complaint is received on the Ombudsman's own initiative. Although the Ontario Ombudsman may investigate, they cannot compel municipalities to take action. The Ombudsman may make recommendations to Council and the municipality as part of their report. It is up to the municipality whether and how to address any recommendations made by the Ombudsman. It is up to the Ombudsman how to respond to complaints. For example, the Ontario Ombudsman's practice is to investigate complaints made to local integrity officers. For example, a local ombudsman. Only after the local complaint processes are completed. The Ontario Ombudsman does not replace locally established complaint mechanisms or act as an integrity commissioner for municipalities. Local integrity officers and municipal codes of conduct are an important part of Ontario's local accountability framework. For more information on the Ontario Ombudsman, including its processes, please see the Ombudsman Act and the Ontario Ombudsman website. Next page, next slide, please. Sorry. Thank you. Privacy and confidentiality. Personal privacy and other confidentiality issues are an important practical and legal consideration for municipal councillors and staff. The Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is the primary statute for privacy and confidentiality. It sets out rules for collection, use, and disclosure of personal information. According to these rules, Counselors and staff in most circumstances protect personal privacy and only collect, use, and disclose personal information in accordance with those rules. For example, depending on circumstances, counselors and staff may or may not be authorized to obtain personal information in the course of their duties. This might mean that at times counselors could not obtain this kind of information from staff. Municipal freedom of information legislation also regulates confidential information of other kinds. In addition to personal information, other laws, including local bylaws, also regulate personal and other kinds of confidential information. Counselors who may have received personal or other confidential information in the course of their duties will have related responsibilities, such as protecting and safeguarding the information. Counselors may wish to check with municipal staff about appropriate measures and the municipality's practices. For example, providing for physical security to help prevent unauthorized disclosure or loss of confidential information. Next slide, please. The role of school board trustee. School trustees are members of the school board. They are locally elected representatives of the public, and they are community's advocate for public education. Only the board, not an individual trustee, has the authority to make decisions or take action. A trustee is often the first point of contact for parents and community members who have questions and or concerns about their local school board or local school, sorry. Candidates should contact the applicable school board for further information about duties, commitments, and etc. Next slide, please. Thank you. Role of school board trustee continued. So the role of the school board trustee is to establish policy direction, participate in making decisions that benefit the entire school board while representing the interests of constituents. School board trustees are accountable to constituents, Ministry of Education, and families. Next slide, please. Thank you. Municipal office eligibility and ineligibility. You must be an eligible elector, which means you must be able to vote. So the list above is a list that shows voter eligibility as well as ineligibility to run and hold office. You can only be nominated if, as of the day you are nominated, you are qualified to hold that office under the Act and are not ineligible under the Municipal Elections Act or any other act or otherwise prohibited by law to be nominated or to hold the office. Please note the municipal clerk is responsible for setting up and running the voting places used in a municipal election. The clerk must comply with any provincial or local public health measures that are in effect and may also put in place additional procedures that they consider necessary for conducting the election for conducting the election. Sorry about that. If you have any questions about public health and safety at the polling place, you should contact your municipal clerk. Thank you. Section 30 of the Municipal Elections Act states that the person shall not be considered an employee for this section by reason only of being a volunteer firefighter as defined in the Fire Protection and Privacy Act, Prevention Act. If a municipal employee wishes to run for office on that municipality's council, they must take a leave of absence before filing their nomination form. Section 30, subsection 4 of the Municipal Elections Act states, if elected, he or she shall be deemed to have resigned from the employment immediately before making the declaration of office. An employee of a municipality who wants to run for office in a different municipality doesn't have to take a leave of absence or resign, but they should check with their employer to see if there are any policies that could affect them. Next slide, please. Thank you. School board trustee eligibility and ineligibility. Eligibility, a resident within the jurisdiction of the board, eligible to run for school board election, be a Canadian citizen aged 18 or older, and meet any other qualifications to vote for the school board, for example, being a Roman Catholic or hold French language rights. Questions about school board eligibility should be directed to the school board secretary. If you're an employee of any school board and you wish to run for a trustee position on any school board in the province, you must take an unpaid leave of absence before you file your nomination form. If elected, you must resign from your job. You cannot work for a school board and be a trustee in Ontario at the same time. The following people are disqualified from being elected as a school board trustee. Cannot be a clerk, deputy clerk, treasurer, or deputy treasurer of a municipality within the jurisdiction of the board. Any person not eligible to vote in the municipality, an employee of the school board, unless they take an unpaid leave of absence and resign if elected. Also, like the ineligibility for municipal office, a judge of any court, a member of Legislative Assembly of Ontario, a senator, or a member of the House of Commons, an inmate of a penal or a correctional institution under sentence of imprisonment. Now I'm going to hand it over to Carol to continue.
Thank you. Right, third-party advertisers. So a third-party advertiser is an individual, corporation, or trade union that is registered in the municipality to promote, support, or oppose a candidate, or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Third-party advertisement means an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that has the purpose of promoting, supporting, or opposing a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Next slide, please. Right. So only the following persons and entities are eligible to file a notice of registration. An individual who's normally a resident in Ontario, a corporation that carries on business in Ontario, a trade union that holds bargaining rights for employees in Ontario. You have the list here on the slide of who are ineligible. Sorry, my little accent there will come out. Regarding item 5, any group or organization that is not a corporation, this includes groups like associations or clubs that are not incorporated. Next slide, please. So nomination process. The first day for filing nominations was May 1st, 2022. This fell on a Sunday, so unless the clerk had policies in place to allow electronic filing, candidates would have to wait to Monday, May 2nd, 2022 to file their nomination. The last day and time for filing nominations for the 2022 election is on August 19, 2022 at 2 p.m. The nomination filing fee is only refunded once the candidate submits a completed financial disclosure of all financial transactions made up to the date the nomination was withdrawn. Am I on the right one? Yeah. So nomination day for a regular election is the 4th Friday in August in the year of the election. So in 2022, that falls on August 19, 2022. So withdrawal of nominations, local election policies may state a candidate must personally attend the clerk's office to withdraw candidacy. If a candidate is in the hospital or incapacitated, this may not be feasible. If a candidate withdraws a nomination, they're still required to file a campaign financial statement covering all of the financial transactions made in the campaign. If they have not spent any money nor raised any funds, they can click on the box and sign the form and it's complete. If a nomination is withdrawn, the candidate is entitled to a refund of their nomination filing fee only after they file their financial auditor statement by the required deadline. So an issue that's raised infrequently, but is of importance nonetheless, is what happens to a campaign which has been opened and a candidate decides to run for a different office. In the candidates guide, the ministry has provided a few examples showing what happens when candidates change their mind and about which office to run for after they filed a nomination paper. Next slide, please. So starting on May 1st until the close of business on August 19, nominations can be submitted to the clerk from anyone who meets the eligibility criteria to run for the office. Candidates must complete Form 1, that's the nomination paper, and submit it to the clerk along with the applicable nomination filing fee. The filing fee is $200 for anyone running for the head of council and $100 for all other offices. The clerk must be satisfied that you are eligible to run in order to certify your nomination. So the clerk can ask you to show identification and fill out an additional form to prove that you are eligible to run for that particular office. The nomination form must have an original signature. If your nomination is not certified by the clerk, your name will not appear on the ballot. Now, if there's a ward system, is there a ward system? It's Bruce. Okay, I'll continue. Sometimes we take it off if there is. So as long as you're eligible to vote in the municipality, you may run in any ward. If you do run in a ward where you do not live, you'll not be able to vote for yourself, as you must vote in the ward in which you reside. So in addition to the legislative requirements, each municipal clerk may establish their own local processes and procedures related to submitting a nomination. So it's important to contact the clerk so you understand the process in that municipality. The electronic. Next slide, please. So nomination process, 25 signatures required. So municipal council candidates are required to obtain 25 nomination signatures on Form 2. Ontario Regulation 10197 provides an exception to this requirement for candidates in municipalities with less than 4,000 electors. So the requirement for nominators to sign nomination forms does not apply to school board candidates. Nominators can nominate more than one candidate and are not required to vote for that candidate. Nominators must meet the eligibility requirements of a municipal elector at the time they sign the nomination form. In a ward system, the nominator can be anyone who's eligible to vote in the municipality, not just the ward. So both the clerk and the candidate are entitled to rely upon the information provided by the nominator. If the nominator did not meet the eligibility requirements when they signed the documents, then they could be held accountable under the penalty section of the Municipal Elections Act. So if a candidate wishes, they can provide more than 25 signatures. They should remember that even if electronic filing is permitted, they are required to obtain 25 original signatures, endorsing their nomination where applicable, and to keep those until after the next regular election in 2026. Next slide, please. So running for a different office. Occasionally, a candidate changes their mind and decide to run for a different office. You can run for only one office at a time. If a candidate files a second nomination, the first nomination is deemed to be withdrawn. If a candidate decides to run for another office and they already have collected the 25 endorsement signatures, they can use these endorsements for the other office. If a candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board, and both positions are elected at large, everything from the first campaign is transferred to the second campaign, and only one financial statement needs to be filed. So unless the candidate decides to run for a different office on the same council or school board, or one or both offices are elected by ward, the two campaigns must be kept separate and two financial statements must be filed. Next slide, please. So registration of third-party advertisers. As we've said before, individuals, corporations, and trade unions may register to be third-party advertisers. There is no registration fee for third-party advertisers. So the third-party advertiser would register with the clerk at the local municipality as per Section 88, Subsection 6, which states an individual, corporation, or trade union may, in person or by an agent, file with the clerk of the municipality responsible for conducting an election a notice of registration to be a registered third party for the election, and the notice must be filed in the prescribed form and must include a declaration of qualifications signed by the individual or by a representative of the corporation or trade union, as the case may be. So a notice of registration may only be filed with the clerk of a local municipality. Once registered, they may advertise in support of or opposition to any candidate being elected by voters in that municipality. This would include council, trustee, and directly elected upper tier candidates. Any person or entity may advertise regarding any issue relating to elections in that municipality without registering. So to advertise regarding questions on the ballot will require registration as a third-party advertiser. For a regular election, the registration cannot be filed earlier than the first day for filing nominations and cannot be filed later than the Friday before voting day during the clerk's office hours. So Section 88, Subsection 6 notes that once the clerk certifies the notice of registration, the individual, corporation, or trade union is a registered third party for the election. Third-party advertising is geographically based and is structured around the concept of influencing a specific set of voters in a specific location. Registering in the municipality where the third-party advertiser hopes to influence votes allows flexibility to support or advocate against any candidate in that specific geography. If an individual wants to influence voters in more than one municipality, for example, over the 3 municipalities covered in a specific school board trustee election, he or she would have to register in each of the 3 municipalities and conduct their activities as 3 separate campaigns. So if the municipality is satisfied that there's been a contravention of the Act, then it can ask that the third-party advertiser remove the advertisement or discontinue the advertising. Next slide, please. So third-party advertiser withdrawal. The third-party advertiser's registration is deemed to be withdrawn if they file a nomination. So this means that their advertising campaign would automatically end when they file their nomination. If a corporation or trade union is registered as the third-party advertiser, it would not be affected by a person filing a nomination, as the person would not be the same entity. A third-party advertiser and a candidate would need to be careful to distance their activities, as third-party advertising may not take place under the direction of a candidate. The existing campaign finance rules would not change. Financing relating to a third-party advertising campaign cannot be transferred to a candidate's campaign. So the existing campaign finance rules would not change. Third-party advertiser who withdraws and closes their campaign cannot transfer that campaign to someone else. And to maintain financial transparency around third-party advertising campaigns, the financial statements of advertisers who end their campaign early should reflect their finances as of the day their campaign ended. The registration period for a third-party advertiser runs until the Friday before voting, so that's October 21st, 2022, or the last day the clerk's office is open before voting day in a by-election. I'm going to pass it on to Caitlin.
Hello, I'm back. So next slide, please. So these next few slides are questions that we get asked quite frequently from the public to the ministry. So I highly recommend paying attention to these slides. Contributions. Campaign accounts are only required if the candidate or third-party advertiser raises or spends money. So for acclamations and campaigns where no funds are raised or spent, there is no need for a campaign account. Trade unions and corporations are not eligible to contribute to candidates' campaigns, although they can participate in the election as third-party advertisers or make contributions to third-party advertising campaigns. Third-party advertisers will generally need to follow the same rules for raising campaign funds and financial reporting as candidates for office. Municipalities must establish rules and procedures regarding the use of municipal or local board resources during the campaign period. This must be passed by May 1st in the year of the election. This will encourage accountability and transparency, so ensure that you're aware of the municipality's policy in this regard. The practice of municipalities providing candidate contact information on their website is not a contribution. Generally, the same contribution rules will apply to third-party advertiser campaigns as to candidates. Refer to both when the rules applies to both. Next slide, please. Contributions Part 2. Contributions from the candidate and their spouse are considered to come from the same person and count against the self-contribution limit. The rules for determining whether corporations are considered to be one contributor are clarified. If one corporation controls the other directly or indirectly, then they are considered to be the same contributor. If the corporations are controlled or owned or controlled by the same person or groups of persons, either directly or indirectly, they are considered to be the same contributor. Next slide, please. Contributions Part 3. Volunteers. We get asked this a lot, these next few bullets, so just keeping everyone aware. The value of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. If a professional, such as an accountant or a lawyer, volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and is a campaign expense. As mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. There is no rule that a candidate, family member, or campaign staff cannot contribute to a third-party advertiser. However, it is a potential optics issue. Next slide, please. Thank you. Contributions Part 4. Campaign contributions are monies, goods, or services given to a candidate for his or her election campaign. Cash contributions may only be accepted up to $25. Contributions more than $25 must be made by check, money order, or by a method that clearly shows where the funds came from. Fundraising functions are events or activities held by or on behalf of a candidate for the primary purpose of raising money for the candidate's campaign. The price of an admission to a fundraising function is a campaign contribution, and a receipt must be issued for the full amount. Receipts must be issued for every contribution and should contain the name, the address of the contributor, and the amount and date. Next slide, please. Thank you. Contribution limits. The limit on contributions to any one candidate or registered third-party advertiser is $1,200. The individual contribution amount has increased from $750 to $1,200, but the aggregate amount of $5,000 stays the same. Since candidates and third-party advertisers are required to inform contributors of contribution limits, you may want to include the limits on the receipts provided to the contributors. Next slide, please. Self-funding limits. Self-funding limit for municipal council candidates based on the number of electors voting for the office to a maximum of $25,000 per candidate. The formula for calculating the limit is $7,500 plus 20 cents per elector for head of council, and $5,000 plus 20 cents per elector for other council offices. The highest self-funding limit that anyone can possibly have is $25,000. If the formula works out to a number that is over $25,000, they still get the $25,000 limit. If the formula works out to less than $25,000, then they get whatever the formula works out to. There are no self-funding limits for school board candidates or third-party advertisers. Next slide, please. Thank you. Borrowing. While candidates can open their campaign account with their own funds, the candidate cannot loan funds to his or her campaign to kickstart it with the intention of getting it all back. The only way that a candidate can reclaim the startup amount is after the election campaign period ends and prior to filing the financial statement. The candidate or his or her spouse may be refunded any contributions from surplus. You can't receive a loan from family members or from any corporate accounts that you may have access to. The loan isn't considered to be a campaign income, and paying it back is not a campaign expense. But if you or your spouse guarantee the loan and the campaign does not repay all of it, the remaining balance is considered to be a contribution, since the guarantor is basically providing the campaign the means to repay the loan. Keep in mind the contribution limit for the candidate and spouse if borrowing. Any interest that the campaign pays on the loan is a campaign expense. Next slide, please. Thank you. Campaign expenses. The replacement value of goods retained by the person, individual, corporation, or trade union from any previous election in the municipality and used in the current election, such as the value of contributions of goods and services, audit and accounting fees, interest on loans under Section 88.17 of the Municipal Act, the cost of holding fundraising functions, the cost of holding parties and making other expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. For a candidate, expenses related to a recount or proceeding under Section 83. Expenses related to a compliance audit. Expenses that are incurred by a candidate with a disability or a registered third party who is an individual with a disability are directly related to the disability and would not have been incurred but for the election to which the expenses relate. The cost of election campaign advertisements within the meaning of Section 88.3 or third-party advertisements as the case may be. For greater certainty, the cost of holding fundraising functions does not include costs related to events or activities that are organized for such purposes as promoting public awareness of a candidate and which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. Promotional materials in which the soliciting of contributions is incidental. In the following circumstances, a candidate's expenses for the 2018 regular election that are described in paragraphs 7 and 8 of subsection 3 may include his or her expenses as a candidate in the 2014 regular election for an office on the same council or local board. The circumstances described in paragraph 4 of subsection 88.2, subsection 1, deficit. The circumstances described in paragraph 5 of section 88, subsection, 88.24, subsection 1, expenses relating to a recount. Tongue twister there. Next slide, please. Thank you. Part 2 of campaign expenses. Candidates and third-party advertisers should become familiar with campaign expense provisions. Campaign expenses are those costs incurred by the candidate or on the candidate's behalf during his or her campaign or by a third-party advertiser during their campaign. The nomination fee is no longer an expense and is not included on the financial disclosure form. Goods and services donated to the campaign are also expenses and must be reported. A receipt must be provided for fair market value. Only nominated persons and or third-party advertisers can incur expenses during their campaign period. Payment of any campaign expenses must be drawn from the campaign account. and a receipt providing the details and proof of payment must be obtained. All expenses must be reported in the relevant financial disclosure form to be filed with the clerk by the candidate or a third-party advertiser. With respect to campaign inventory, if you ran in the last election and want to use leftover goods, such as signs or office supplies, you have to determine what the current market value for those goods is and what it would cost if you were to purchase them today. These amounts are recorded as an expense. If you end up with leftover inventory at the end of this campaign and it becomes your personal property, but if you want to store them in another election, if you want to use it in another election, and any costs for storage are not considered campaign expenses. We'll be going into a short 5-minute break. It's now 8:16. We'll be back at 8:21. Thank you. With our presentation now. So now I will hand it over to Carol Sobe to continue with the presentation. Thank you.
All right. We're going to go to the next slide. The next slide is spending limits. So the spending limit formula for candidates and the maximum amount for parties after voting day are set out in Ontario Regulation 10197. So the clerk calculates the spending limits twice. The first time upon a candidate filing the nomination form, the clerk shall calculate the spending limit based on the number of electors on the voters list as it existed on September 15, 2018. The second calculation is based on the number of electors on the voters list as it exists on September 15, 2022. So this calculation must be provided to candidates on or before September 25, 2022. Whichever number is higher is the spending limit, and the clerk's calculation is final. Next slide, please. So clerks will continue to provide estimates of the spending limits, and the dates have been slightly amended with transition dates from 2018's election. So candidates will be required to inform their contributors of the contribution limits. So that's how much a contributor can contribute to an individual candidate's campaign and the aggregate limit on contributions to any one council or local board election. Spending limit is to be provided by September 25th. If a third-party advertiser has registered in more than one municipality, each registration is a separate campaign with its own spending limits. The campaign finance rules are generally the same for third-party advertisers as they are for candidates. So they're subject to the same contribution limits and have calculated spending limits. These include financial filing requirements, requests for extensions, and records. Third-party advertisers are also required to ensure contributions and expenses are tracked and accounted for. Proper record retention, proper direction is provided to those incurring expenses or accepting contributions on their behalf, and that spending limits are adhered to. We're going to go to the next slide, please. So most expenses are subject to the spending limit. Those listed on this slide are not. Expenses related to fundraising functions are exempt from the campaign spending limit, but in order to qualify as a fundraising function, an event must have the raising of money as its primary purpose. Campaign events at which incidental fundraising takes place do not qualify as fundraising functions. Similarly, a brochure promoting awareness of a candidate that contains contact information to make campaign contributions doesn't qualify as a fundraising function. Expenses that were subject to the spending limit if incurred before voting day are not subject to the spending limit if incurred after voting day. Next slide, please. So third-party advertisers will be subject to two spending limits: a general spending limit and a separate limit for expenses related to parties and expressions of appreciation after the close of voting. Ontario Regulation 10197 provides the following formula for calculating third-party spending limits: 5,000 plus 5 cents per elector to a maximum of 25,000. The formula used is based on the number of electors entitled to vote in an election in a municipality. The Municipal Election Act also provides that the spending limit for parties and other expressions of appreciation after voting day be set at 10% of the general spending limit. This would be consistent with the spending limit in place for candidates. Next slide, please. So as a candidate or a third-party advertiser, it's important that you be fully aware of the responsibilities regarding election spending and accepting campaign contributions. A question we are asked each municipal election is whether there's a requirement for every candidate to have a chief financial officer. The answer is no. We suggest you familiarize yourself with sections 88 subsection 8 to 88 subsection 21 of the Municipal Elections Act, and also the financial statements that you will be required to file. This will help you in organizing your records and how they have to be reported. You're required under the Municipal Elections Act to keep accurate records and open a campaign bank account if you're spending any money or you're accepting any contributions. A bank account is not required if a candidate or third-party advertiser does not receive or spend any money. Next slide, please. So candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep complete and accurate financial statements during the course of their campaigns. All contributions and expenses are to be accounted for and disclosed by the candidate on the relevant prescribed financial form. All candidates and third-party advertisers are required to keep all campaign financial records until after November 15, 2026, when a new council takes office. These rules apply whether you are elected or not. Next slide, please. So store receipts in a secure place as they are valuable documents. Receipts must be signed by the candidate or his or her designate. It's good practice to have a receipt that is a multi-part form, one for the contributor and one or more for the candidate's records. Receipts should be sequentially numbered. Open a bank account which provides monthly statements and canceled checks. Produce duplicate deposit slips for every deposit, listing the name of the contributors and the amounts received from each. Maintain a petty cash fund to handle minor expenses and obtain invoices to support all payments from the fund. At any time, the cash on hand plus the total amount of invoices should equal the original amount of the petty cash fund. The fund can be replenished periodically by a check drawn on the campaign account in an amount equal to the total amount of the invoices. Candidates and third-party advertisers may find it useful to look over form number 4, that's for candidates, and form number 8 for third-party advertisers, respectively, at the beginning of their campaign, to give them an idea of what information will be needed to report on at the end of the campaign. So once again, it is a requirement under the Municipal Elections Act to maintain records right up until November 15, 2026. Next slide, please. So the period for third-party advertisement, as shown on the slide, is the period when the rules for third-party advertisers applies. So in 2022, that's from May 1st until the close of voting at 8 p.m. on October 24th, 2022. Third-party advertisers and candidates are required to identify themselves on signs and advertisement. Next slide, please. So the broadcaster or publisher of a third-party or candidate advertisement shall maintain records containing the following information for a period of 4 years after the date the advertisement appears, and shall permit the public to inspect the records during normal business hours. So it needs the name of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, the name, business address, and telephone number of the individual who deals with the broadcaster or publisher under the direction of the candidate or registered third-party advertiser, a copy of the advertisement or the means of reproducing it for inspection, a statement of the charge made for its appearance. So I'm going to hand over to Caitlin for the next slides.
Thank you. Financial statements. Section 88.25 of the Municipal Elections Act. All candidates are required to file Form 4 with the clerk regardless of how much or how little they spent or fundraised. If you filed a nomination form, you must file a Form 4. This form is required even if you withdrew your nomination or were acclaimed. If you were registered as a third-party advertiser, you must complete Form 8. A candidate may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. The clerk is required to make public a report of which candidates filed financial statements and which did not. Next slide, please. Part 2, financial statements. The appointment of an auditor by the candidate is mandatory if expenses or contributions exceed $10,000. Auditor must be licensed under the Public Accounting Act of 2004, and please note that the campaign statements are public documents. Next slide, please. Financial statements, Part 3. Candidates can file their financial documents at any time after voting day to January 3rd, adjusted from December 31st as it falls on a Saturday. Filing the financial statement ends the campaign period. This will make it easier for acclamations and campaigns where little or no expense is incurred. Clerks will be required to report whether candidates have met their financial filing obligation and publish that report on the municipal website or in another electronic form. This needs to be done by April 30th in case of a regular election or with 90 days of a by-election. Next slide, please. Financial statements, Part 4. The nomination fee is only refundable if the financial statement is filed on time. A candidate or third-party advertiser who misses the filing deadline may file within the 30-day grace period, provided a $500 late filing fee is paid to the municipality. Please note a candidate who chooses to file within the 30-day grace period will be subject to both the $500 late filing fee as well as the loss of their nomination refund. A candidate or third-party advertiser may resubmit a financial statement to correct an error up until the filing deadline. Next slide, please. We get a lot of questions on this slide, so please pay attention to this one. Surplus. When filing the financial statement, a candidate or third-party advertiser with a campaign surplus must pay the entire amount to the clerk. Prior to paying over any surplus funds to the clerk, a candidate or third-party advertiser is entitled to a refund of any contributions they or their spouse, if an individual, made to the campaign, not to anyone else. The amount that may be refunded is lesser of the amount of the relevant contribution or the amount of the surplus. The clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the candidate if they need it for a compliance audit. The clerk is required to place surplus monies in trust for use by the third-party advertiser if they need it for a compliance audit. If neither the candidate nor third-party advertiser requires the funds for these purposes, it becomes the property of the municipality or school board. Now I'll hand it over to Carol to continue. Thank you.
All right, next slide, please. So compliance audit. Every council and school board must establish a compliance audit committee. Members of a compliance audit committee cannot be members of the council or school board, an employee, a candidate in the election, or a registered third-party advertiser. The clerks are to review contributions and to prepare a report for consideration by the compliance audit committee if a contributor appears to have exceeded any contribution limits. This process is related to reviewing contributions as reported on the financial statements, and it is not connected to the compliance audit process. So if it's apparent to the clerk that a contributor has exceeded one or more of the contribution limits, the clerk would report this to the committee. Then the committee would then meet to determine whether to proceed with legal action. The legislation does not specify what details are to be provided in the report to the committee. Electors entitled to vote in an election may apply for a compliance audit even if the candidate has not filed a financial statement. The application must be in writing and set out the electors' reasons for why they believe the Municipal Elections Act has been contravened. The application must be submitted to the municipal clerk or the secretary of the school board within 90 days of filing deadline. The Compliance Audit Committee will consider the application and decide whether to retain an auditor to undertake a compliance audit of the candidate's financial return. Next slide, please. So the Compliance Audit Committee is required to provide brief written reasons for its decision. The Compliance Audit Committee meetings are required to be open to the public, but the committee may deliberate in private. Electors can apply for a compliance audit of a third-party advertiser's campaign finances. The minister has the authority to make a regulation setting out qualification for compliance audit committee members. So in subsection 8833(8) of the Municipal Elections Act, the written reasons for the committee's decision shall be given to the candidate, the clerk with whom the candidate filed his or her nomination, the secretary of the local board, if it's applicable, and the applicant. So if an audit occurs, the report must be circulated to the same individuals. The Compliance Audit Committee considers the auditor's report, and if they determine that there has been an apparent contravention of the Municipal Elections Act, the committee will decide whether to proceed with legal action. Decisions of the committee may be appealed to the Superior Court of Justice. A person who believes that a candidate has contravened the Municipal Elections Act may proceed with legal action without having first obtained a compliance audit. Next slide, please. So section 90, subsection 2 of the Municipal Elections Act states that an offense described in subsection 3 constitutes a corrupt practice, and a person who commits it is on conviction disqualified from voting at an election until the next regular election has taken place after the election to which the offense relates, in addition to being liable to any other penalty provided in this act. So section 90, subsection 3, no person shall directly or indirectly, just get there, offer, give, lend, or promise, or agree to give or lend any valuable consideration in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. Advance, pay, or cause to be paid money intending that it be used to commit an offense referred to in clause A, which was the first one I gave you, or knowing that it will be used to repay money used in that way. give, procure, or promise or agree to procure an office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. Apply for, accept, or agree to accept any valuable consideration or office or employment in connection with the exercise or non-exercise of an elector's vote. And finally, give, procure, or promise or agree to procure an office or employment to induce a person to become a candidate, refrain from becoming a candidate, or withdraw his or her candidacy. Next slide, please. So what you have on the slide here are the penalties for individual, candidate, trade union, or corporation. I'm going to give you a sec to look at those. So ineligibility to vote is a penalty if you are convicted of a corrupt practice. We're going to go to the next slide. So the voters list. The preliminary list of electors as corrected by the clerk becomes the voters list on September 1st, 2022. The clerk determines how and when individuals can apply to have their name and information corrected or added to or removed from the voters list. The clerk can also remove a name from the list if the clerk becomes aware that the person has died. The clerk shall not provide a copy of the voters list under section 3, subsection 3, or a part of the voters list until September 1st. Next slide, please. So one copy of the voters list can be provided to each municipal candidate or trustee candidate. Requests for this must be made in writing to the clerk. Candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the names of the electors entitled to vote for that office. Copies of the voters list are not available before September 1st, 2022. Now, this is really important. The voters list shall not be posted in a public place. The voters list shall not be made available to the public by posting on an internet website or via any other print or electronic medium of mass communication. Third-party advertisers are not eligible to receive a copy of the voters list. Candidates running in a ward are entitled only to that portion of the list that contains the names of the electors entitled to vote for that office. Next slide, please. So the clerk may require anyone who receives a copy of the list to sign a receipt acknowledging the list is only to be used for election purposes, and any other use would be in violation of the Municipal Elections Act. An elector's name shall appear only once on the list. In a ward system, an elector is entitled to vote only in the ward where he or she resides. I'll pass it back to Caitlin.
Thank you. I will be finishing this off for us tonight. Woohoo! Scrutineers. Only a candidate may appoint scrutineers to represent him or her during the voting and the counting of votes, including during a recount. Third-party advertisers cannot appoint scrutineers. In the traditional election where voting takes place at a poll, the Deputy Returning Officer, DRO, is in charge of the activity in the voting place, and the DRO may ask the scrutineer to leave if the scrutineer is not complying with the legislation. Candidates and scrutineers should respect that the DRO must ensure fairness, access, privacy, and security of the vote. A useful tip: check with the clerk to see if a list of scrutineers' rights is being given to election staff at the poll. If so, use that list or prepare your own and hand out to each of your scrutineers a list of their rights, which are spelled out in Section 47, Subsection 5 of the Municipal Elections Act. There are no age restrictions for scrutineers. Next slide, please. Recounts. A recount is automatic if the vote is tied. Councils and school boards have the option of establishing policies prior to the election that also allow for an automatic recount. Council still retains the option to pass a resolution for a recount within 30 days after the clerk has declared the results of the election. An eligible elector can apply to the courts for a recount within 30 days of the clerk's declarations of the results. Next slide, please. Key dates. Voting day is Monday, October 24th, 2022, between 10 a.m. and to 8 p.m., unless reduced hours are set out in a bylaw for retirement homes and institutions, or council has passed a bylaw to open voting earlier than 10 a.m. in Section 46 of the Municipal Elections Act. The campaign period, the time when a candidate can accept contributions and incur election expenses, runs from the date the nomination is submitted up until January 3rd, 2023. The campaign period, the time the third-party advertiser can incur expenses, begins on the date that the registration is certified. The earliest date is May 1st of 2022 until January 3rd of 2023. And lastly, the deadline for the filing of the campaign financial statement in the clerk's office is Friday, March 31st of 2023, no later than 2 p.m. All candidates and third-party advertisers must file the statement, regardless of how much they spent or received in contributions. Next slide, please. Thank you. Resources. So the first link will take you to the eLaws website, where all provincial legislation is available online, including the associated regulations. You may want to familiarize yourself with the Municipal Elections Act, the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflicts of Interest Act, and if running for a school board, the Education Act. The second link is to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing website. From this site, you will be able to access very handy and useful tools, the 2022 voters, candidates, and third-party advertisers guides. And lastly, the Municipal World website. If you click on the link on the icon bookshop, it illustrates a list of books that are related to running for municipal office. They are available to purchase online. Next slide and last one. So this concludes our presentation. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, Caitlin Reddick, your municipal advisor. My email, oh, it has Jane's email. Sorry about that. So my email is not that. My email is Caitlin, CAITLIN, period, REDDICK @ontario.ca. We will be heading into a question period now. I actually received a question during our break, so I want to answer that for one of our participants today. She was asking what third-party advertising is and what the difference is between just a regular Joe Blow just putting advertisements up. So third-party advertising refers to advertisements or other materials that support, promote, or oppose a candidate, or support, promote, or oppose a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. The meaning of third party in this context means a person or entity who is not a candidate. Third party advertising is separate from any candidate's campaign and must be done independently from a candidate. Any advertisements or materials that are made and distributed by a candidate or under a candidate's direction are part of the candidate's campaign. Third-party advertisement is a way for those outside of the candidate's campaign to express support of or opposition to a candidate's, or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot, and try to persuade voters to vote a certain way. A third-party advertisement is an advertisement in any broadcast, print, electronic, or other medium that promotes, supports, or opposes a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot. Advertisements includes traditional ads as well as materials such as brochures or signs. Activities that do not involve spending, such as discussion or expressing an opinion about a candidate or an answer to a question on the ballot, are not considered to be third-party advertisements. This would include speaking to friends and neighbors, posting on social media such as Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, sending an email to a group or a mailing list. Internal and communications from an employer to their employees, a corporation to its shareholders, directors, members, or employees, or by a trade union to its members or employees are not considered to be third-party advertising. Advertising about an issue rather than a candidate or a yes or no answer to a question on the ballot is not considered third-party advertising. For example, signs saying support local businesses or keep the waterfront green would not be third-party advertising, even if the candidate has made those issues part of their campaign. Sorry, a lot of word vomit. Do we have any questions in the chats? No? Oh, sure. Exactly. Yes, exactly. You have to make your own elections bank account. No problem. As long as it's a way that you have a record. So for example, when I send an EMT, I get an email. Or if you even print out your like debit or like, your your statement as long as it can say like where it came from. So usually when I send an EMT, it'll say my name. So that would be a good example. And plus when you give their contributor their receipt, as long as you have like their name, their address, and all their information, as well as like a copy of your statement, that should be enough. Hi.
Sorry to interrupt. If you could just put your microphone on, the people online aren't able to hear the question. So, and just press you're good to go. Thank you.
So the conversation about IC and Ombudsman, I understand was a general conversation, but what is the process that we use in Bruce County?
I can try to answer that one. So each municipality, they will appoint their own IC. So it's up to the town council or the municipality. And with respect to the ombudsman or like a closed meeting investigator, if the municipality does not pass a bylaw to appoint a closed meeting investigator, then the default is the ombudsman. And yes, and I think for the most part, municipalities have kind of defaulted to the ombudsman.
So when you say appoint, where do you appoint the IC from? Is it a paid position? Is it external third party?
Yeah, most municipalities will have done some kind of RFP or gone through a process to select their integrity commissioner, and it is appointed by council. And the RFP will indicate how much per diem or if there's a retainer for the IC. So that's kind of, that'll be specific to the integrity commissioner. So in Bruce County, what we've done in the past is that we worked with the upper tier and then the lower tier municipalities had the option of hiring the same integrity commissioner, but it's individually appointed by each council.
Do you want to answer?
What kind of work for himself?
I'm just like if they.
That's actually a good question. I'd want to research that a little bit more.
I just wanted to let people that have joined us online, if they have questions, they just can unmute themselves and ask the question.
This is Karen Phillips, and I would like to ask a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I was wondering, it mentioned that this presentation is recorded. Is that going to be accessible so that we can review all this wonderful information that we've been given?
So we have been recording the session and it will be made available at some point online on the Bruce County website. I can certainly share it with the lower tiers as well.
That would be excellent. And could Caitlin give her email address again?
Thank you. Sorry about putting my wrong information. My bad. So my email is CAITLIN period REDDICK at ontario.ca. I try to reply within 1 to 2 days, so I will not leave you hanging. But if you do message me over the weekend, you will have to wait until Monday.
Okay, so caitlin.reddick@ontario.on.ca.
No. Caitlin.reddick@ontario.ca.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question through the chat if you'd like me to read it.
Sure.
I'm wondering about contributions of goods and services. What separates a volunteer and a professional when services are contributed by an individual?
Just 1 second. Thank you. I know I have it right here. Just a second. So I'll open this one. Oh, I know. I'm just sorry. Just 1 second. I'll answer your question. Yeah, sure. Why does it go there? I'm just trying to go back. There you go. So the values of services provided by volunteers is generally not considered to be a contribution. If a professional such as a lawyer or an accountant volunteers to provide services for which they would normally be paid, the market value of the service must be recorded as a contribution by the volunteer and is a campaign expense. As mentioned previously, only third-party advertisers can accept contributions from corporations and unions. There is no rule that a candidate, family member, or a campaign staff cannot contribute to a third-party advertiser. However, it is a potential optics issue. I hope that answers your question.
So I did find an answer for you.
Can you repeat the question so other people can hear?
Before you do that, would you mind going to the microphone at the podium so that
Yeah.
online people can hear you? Thank you very much.
Start. Ooh.
This one here.
I think you have to turn it on.
One works. Excellent, thank you. So my question is, if a individual who is a person running for, say, council or any of the others is a professional and is completing a service, whether it be video editing or legal work, does this count as an expense?
Thank you for your question. It's very interesting. There is an answer actually in the guide. So I'm going to read it out to you. Your campaign income includes all contributions received from yourself, your spouse, or other eligible contributors. This includes the value of contributions of goods and services. So services as well, any service would fall into that. Income also includes any refunds of deposit, interest earned by your campaign bank account, and revenue from fundraising events and activities that is not deemed a contribution. So example, if you sold refreshments at a market value.
I also wanted to add to that because we have sometimes people that are, let's say, photographers of a candidate and they want pictures done for free or something like that. So if a professional who would normally charge for a service gives you that service for free, the market value of the service is considered to be a contribution. And again, I just want to reiterate that the voters, candidates, and third-party advertiser guides on the ministry's website are very useful tools. So most of the questions that have been asked tonight have been provided by those guides. If you have additional questions as well that you may forget tonight, you can always reach out to me at caitlin.reddick@ontario.ca or your municipal clerk. Do we have any other questions?
No more in the chat, unless there's some here.
Hello.
Sorry. I was just going to ask, in addition to the recording of the session, the actual presentation that was on the screen, Caitlin, you said if you click those links, but how do we get a copy of that presentation or electronic copy of?
I will let Donna answer that one for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will publish the presentation on the website. Does that mean that the links will work if we do that, Caitlin? Okay,
They should work, yes.
thank you. No worries.
So the copy of the presentation has been handed to the county clerk, Donna, and it will be available for your use. No problem. So this concludes our candidates and third-party information session. I want to thank everyone for coming in person as well as virtually. We really appreciate your interest in your local government, and I hope you have a wonderful night. Thank you very much.